My name is Gladys Ryder. I'm 70 years old. I live alone in a small upstairs apartment above what used to be my fabric store in Eugene, Oregon. It's quiet most days now. Too quiet sometimes. The store's been closed since the pandemic. I kept the lights on for a while after COVID hit, hoping things would bounce back, but they didn't. So I boxed up the bolts of fabric, packed away the sewing tables, and let it go. That store was my life for nearly 30 years. Ryder Stitchery, it was called. Everyone in town knew it. People came in for wedding dress, lace, baby blanket kits, or just to talk while I showed them how to sew a hem. I met so many folks through that door. I raised my son, Clifford, in the back room while I worked. He'd sit on a stool eating cheese crackers while I rang up customers. I gave that place everything I had. Now, I spend most mornings with a cup of tea by the window, watching the sidewalk stay mostly empty. I water my plants, listen to the radio, sometimes do puzzles when my hands don't ache. It's not a bad life, just a small one. A few weeks ago, Clifford called and said he was hosting brunch at his new place. Said Whitney's parents were flying in from Spokane and they wanted everyone to meet and feel like one big family. His voice was upbeat, like he was offering me something special. I said sure. I baked my cinnamon coffee cake that morning, the same one I made for every PDA meeting, bake sale, and Clifford's birthdays until he was old enough to stop asking for cakes altogether. It's the kind that smells like nutmeg and holidays. I wrapped it in foil and took the bus across town. Clifford's house is newer, 2-story, big porch, new wood floors. Whitney likes things to match, so everything's beige and clean. I got there a little early. Old habit. Whitney opened the door. She looked surprised to see me so soon, but smiled politely. "Oh, hi Gladys. Come in." The table was already set, cloth napkins, matching glasses, fresh tulips in the center. You could tell they'd planned it carefully. Her parents, Barry and Denise, were already there, sipping mimosas. I said hello and offered the cake. Whitney took it like it was a grocery store bunt and walked it into the kitchen without saying a word. I sat down at the far end of the table. Clifford didn't really look my way. He was busy pouring drinks, pulling out chairs, playing host like he was at an open house. Everyone talked easily. Whitney's parents were nice enough, but loud in that way people are when they want to take over the room. They talked about their golf club, their winter home in Palm Springs, their daughter's glow up. I smiled and nodded, but I barely said a word. No one asked me much, and when I spoke, someone usually talked right over me. I tried to shake it off, told myself it wasn't personal. Maybe they were nervous. Maybe they didn't know what to say to an older woman who wore orthopedic shoes and didn't drink. Then we got to the part where they started talking about the wedding. Whitney said they were thinking of doing something small, probably up near Leavenworth. A vineyard wedding, just family and a few friends. Clifford said they were still ironing out details. I smiled and asked, gently, "Well, if you need any help planning, I'm happy to pitch in. I used to make table runners for weddings back in the shop. I could sew something for the reception, if you'd like." That's when it happened. Clifford didn't look angry. He didn't even pause. He just looked at me, calm as ever, and said, "Mom, we're just trying to be nice, including you. Don't think you matter in all this. Has anyone ever said something to you that you just couldn't unhear? If that moment came flooding back just now, hit the like button so I know I'm not alone, and share this video with someone who's been through it too." Just like that, the whole room went still. Barry cleared his throat. Whitney shifted in her seat. Denise reached for her napkin, folded it tighter. I sat there. I felt my face burn. My hands started sweating. I waited for him to laugh, to take it back, to say he was joking. He didn't. He just sipped his mimosa and started talking about catering options like nothing happened. I didn't cry. I didn't say anything. I just nodded once, quietly stood up, picked up my purse, and walked out the front door. No one followed me. I walked 2 blocks before I found a bench and sat down. The wind was sharp that day. I held the strap of my purse like a lifeline. I couldn't tell if I was shaking from the cold or from something deeper. Probably both. That sentence, "Don't think you matter," kept playing in my head like it was on repeat. Not shouted, not whispered, just spoken like a line in a grocery list. It wasn't just what he said. It was how easy it was for him to say it. Like I was a name on a guest list they were trying to cross off politely. I sat there a long time before catching the bus back home. The bus driver gave me a kind look, like maybe he could tell something wasn't right. When I got home, I set the coffee cake on the counter. I hadn't even unwrapped it. I stood there in my kitchen above the empty shop and let the silence sink in. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just hollow. Like something had been pulled out of me I didn't even know was missing. But I knew this much. That sentence, "Don't think you matter," it wasn't just a mistake. It was the truth he'd been carrying for a while. He just finally said it out loud. And now that he had, I couldn't unhear it. I couldn't unfeel it. And I wouldn't ignore it. Not this time. Because if that was how he saw me, like a box to check, a polite inclusion, then I had to start seeing myself clearly too. Even if that meant stepping away. Even if that meant letting go. Even if that meant finally saying, enough. 12 years ago, my husband Leonard passed. Kidney failure. It was slow, but still somehow sudden. One day, we were talking about remodeling the bathroom, and the next we were talking about dialysis. He hung on for a while, but not long enough to see Clifford settle. Not long enough to see Caden, our only grandson, take his first steps. After Leonard passed, I didn't have time to sit and fall apart. The world kept going, and I had bills to pay. I kept the store running, Ryder Stitchery, the one we'd built from scratch when Clifford was still a boy. I opened that shop when I was 33. It was never fancy, but people trusted me. Folks came in for baby blankets, prom dresses, wedding veils, and repairs. I stitched memories for other people's families while holding mine together as best I could. But after Leonard died, things got quieter. I didn't have the energy to keep the whole space open. So I closed the back half, sold some of the shelving, and used the back room for storage. A year later, when Clifford told me he wanted to start his real estate business but didn't want to pay for office space, I handed him the keys to the back unit. I didn't ask for rent. I didn't even think to. He said, "Thanks, Mom. I'll only be here until I can get a place of my own." That was 10 years ago. When Clifford divorced his first wife, he called me from the parking lot of a U-Haul place, said he needed help moving and didn't want to talk about it. I drove across town and loaded boxes in the rain without asking questions. He looked broken that day, and I remembered what it felt like to be young and lost. So I told him, "You can stay as long as you need." He moved into a condo nearby, and I helped him cover the deposit. After the divorce, things got heavy. He had partial custody of Caden, a sweet boy, sensitive, took after Leonard in that quiet way. Clifford was trying to juggle work and parenting, and it showed. He dropped Caden off with a bag that didn't have extra socks or the right snacks. I stepped in. I picked Caden up from daycare when Clifford worked late. I made dinner, sat through meltdowns, sang bedtime songs even when my back ached. I took him to speech therapy on Tuesdays, and I paid for it when the copay kept getting missed. Clifford thanked me sometimes. A quick hug, a distracted, appreciated Mom. But it didn't stick, like tossing a penny in a well and never checking if it made a splash. When Whitney came into the picture, things started to shift. Slowly at first. At that time, I thought maybe the family was coming together again. She was polite, well-dressed, always smiling. I tried to make her feel welcome, bought flowers when they hosted their first dinner, even though it was mostly takeout. She said, "You didn't have to do that." And I told her I wanted to. After a while, I started noticing I wasn't being asked anymore. I found out from Caden that they had signed him up for a new after-school program. They hadn't mentioned it. Clifford changed pediatricians without letting me know, even though I'd been the one taking him to most of the appointments. I'd walk into Clifford's office downstairs, and it would be rearranged. New furniture, new setup. I'd ask questions, and the answers were always short. Rushed. Like I was bothering them. One day, I noticed the key to the side door had been changed. I asked about it, and Clifford said, "Oh, we had to update for security. I'll get you a new one soon." I never got it. I used to keep extra snacks in the shop kitchen for Caden. Granola bars and juice boxes. One afternoon, I came downstairs, and the cabinet was empty. I asked Clifford, and he said, "Oh, Whitney likes to keep things tidy." I nodded, didn't push. Looking back now, I realized those moments were pieces of a bigger picture, a picture where I slowly faded into the edges. I spent years doing everything I could to support them, quietly, without asking for much. I told myself that's what family does. You help, you show up, you keep the wheels turning. But at that brunch, when Clifford said, "Don't think you matter," it wasn't just a sentence. It was the truth behind all those little choices they'd made. All the birthdays I wasn't invited to. All the school updates I never got. The side door key. The snacks. The silence. It hit me then. That brunch wasn't the beginning. It was the final page of a story that had been written years ago, one I hadn't realized I was no longer in. For so long, I had been filling gaps, cooking, cleaning, helping, giving, because I thought that meant I mattered. But I was wrong. Because if I truly mattered, they wouldn't have had to include me. I would have been part of it without being asked. Now, I was starting to see things clearly, and I wasn't sure I liked what I saw. It's strange how clear things become when you start looking backward. After that brunch, I sat in my apartment and ran every moment through my mind like old film. Things I brushed off, words I told myself not to overthink. But now, every one of them landed differently. I started to see the pattern. It began when Whitney moved in. At first, it was small things, new curtains in the front room, a different doormat, fresh paint in the kitchen. I noticed the changes when I dropped by with soup or mail. No one ever said, "Hey, Mom, what do you think of this color?" Or "We're thinking of rearranging. Got any ideas?" It was just done. Quietly, without me. They tore out the old carpet Leonard, and I had picked out. It was worn, sure, but it had history. They replaced it with hardwood floors, which looked nice, but cold. They started redoing the backyard too, added a deck and a back patio. I remember standing there one morning with my cup of tea, looking out the window at the concrete being poured. The new patio blocked off the garden path I used to take to the shed. Leonard built that shed. We planted rose bushes along the walkway years ago. Now, it led to a wall of wood planks and flower pots that weren't mine. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was their home now, even though I still lived right upstairs. Then came the school contact list. One afternoon, Caden had a field trip, and Clifford asked me to pack an extra sandwich for him, just in case. I showed up at the school to drop it off, like I'd done before. The woman at the front desk looked confused. "I don't see you on the emergency list," she said. "You'll need to call the parents." I was still listed the year before. When I brought it up to Clifford later, he said, "Oh, Whitney took care of all that. She probably streamlined it." Streamlined. That word sat in my stomach like a rock. Still, I kept showing up. I baked for school fundraisers, even though no one told me when they were. I found out through a neighbor that the PTA needed volunteers. I baked lemon bars and left them on the porch in a covered tray with a note that just said, "From Gladys." No one mentioned them, not even Caden. I paid for his braces when the bill came, and Clifford said money was tight. "It's just this once," he told me. "We'll pay you back." They didn't. I didn't ask. That year, they forgot my birthday. Twice. The first time, I said nothing. I figured maybe they were overwhelmed. The second time, I waited all day. Not even a text. The next morning, Whitney called to ask if I could watch Caden the following weekend. I said I had plans. I didn't. I just didn't feel like being useful that day. Holidays changed too. Thanksgiving used to be a big deal for us. I'd make sweet potato casserole, green beans with almonds, and my cranberry sauce from scratch. Leonard used to carve the turkey. After he passed, Clifford took over. It wasn't perfect, but we made it work. Then one year, Clifford said, "Let's keep this simple, just the four of us this time." He meant himself, Whitney, Caden, and Whitney's niece, who had moved in for school. I spent that Thanksgiving eating soup alone, watching old movies. I told myself it was okay, that I needed the rest anyway. But deep down, I felt the gap. Every year after that, it was the same. We're going to do something small this year. Whitney's parents are visiting. We're traveling. There was always a reason, and I accepted every one of them. Even when I wasn't invited, I kept giving. Caden needed a new backpack. I ordered one online. Whitney had surgery. I made meals and dropped them off. Clifford mentioned needing a new printer. I used my rainy day fund to buy one. No one asked me to, but no one told me not to either. I used to tell myself I was just being helpful, that it was enough to be needed. That's what mothers do, right? We step in. We don't keep score. But after that brunch, I started seeing it differently. It wasn't just forgetting to include me in decisions. It was removing me from the picture altogether. Not cruelly, not loudly, just little by little. Quiet steps, new locks, new routines, new plans made. Without me, I started realizing they didn't see me as family anymore. They saw me as backup, an extra, someone to call when things got hard, but not someone to sit with at the table. And the hardest part, I let it happen because I wanted to believe that if I kept giving, kept loving, kept showing up, they'd notice. They'd remember who I was to them. But that's not how it works. People don't see what's right in front of them when they think it'll always be there. And I had made myself too available for too long. So when Clifford looked me in the eye and said, "Don't think you matter," it didn't come out of nowhere. It was the ending of a sentence they'd been writing for years. When I got back from the brunch, I didn't take off my shoes. I just dropped my purse by the coat rack and sat down on the edge of the couch. I hadn't even realized I was still holding the tote bag. Inside it, my cinnamon coffee cake was still warm, wrapped up the way I always did, with wax paper and foil tight around the pan. I sat there, staring at it. They hadn't touched it, not even out of politeness, not even a slice cut to make it look like it mattered. That cake was more than just something I baked. It was me showing up, me contributing, me trying to still be part of the family. It was the same cake I made for Clifford's third birthday, when Leonard blew up balloons that wouldn't stay on the walls. The same recipe I'd pulled out every Easter, every church potluck, every time someone in town had a baby or a hard week. It had been part of my way of loving people, and now it sat in my lap like a symbol of how invisible I'd become. If you've ever baked, helped, or showed up out of love and still felt invisible, drop a love emoji and your location in the comments. These stories need to be heard. You're not the only one. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't feel sadness. Not really. just tired. Not the kind of tired that goes away with a nap, but the kind that builds when you keep giving and nobody really sees it. I placed the cake on the kitchen counter and looked around my little apartment. It was small, sure, but it was mine. Same couch I'd had for over a decade. Same chipped mug I used every morning. Same pictures on the wall that I hadn't taken down, even when the shop closed. My life was quieter now, but it still had weight. Or, at least, I thought it did. I made a cup of tea and sat back down. Leonard's voice came to me like a whisper, the way it always did when things got too still. He used to say, "If people can't see your value, don't stand in the shadows hoping they will." He told me that once when a vendor from Portland tried to shortchange me on a fabric shipment, I stood there, debating whether to speak up, and Leonard gently nudged me to say what I needed to say. I did, and I was better for it. That memory stayed with me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I turned the lamp on and opened the filing cabinet under the window. I hadn't gone through those drawers in years. I still had folders labeled in Leonard's handwriting, still had old receipts from when Clifford was in high school. I dug around until I found the folder I'd almost forgotten about, property records, Ryder Stitchery. Inside were the original papers for the building, the deed, the tax records, a photocopy of the check Leonard's dad had written us when we bought the place in the early 90s, back when the whole building cost less than what a kitchen remodel goes for today. I looked through every page, reading line by line, and there it was. The building, both floors, was still in my name. The shop downstairs and the apartment above. Every square inch. Legally and completely mine. No liens. No shared title. Nothing Clifford ever signed. No transfer. Nothing even close. All this time, I think Clifford assumed I had signed it over. I probably let him believe that, without saying much. It wasn't something we discussed, and I never brought it up. I guess I figured what was mine was his too, because that's what mothers do. But I never actually made the change. He built his business downstairs on the idea that he had free space. I never asked for rent, never drew up a lease. I just let him use it, figuring it was helping him get started. That was 10 years ago. Now, looking at those papers, something shifted in me. I hadn't been erased completely, not where it counted. They'd cut me out of birthdays and holidays, changed locks, left me out of conversations. But they hadn't touched this. The paper in my hand proved that I still owned something solid, something real. It wasn't revenge I was feeling. It wasn't even bitterness. It was clarity. I sat back in my chair, tea gone cold on the table, and breathed deep for the first time in days. They could leave my cake untouched. They could forget my birthday. They could whisper plans in rooms I wasn't invited to. But this place, this building, was still mine. And now that I knew that, I wasn't going to forget it again. I went to the drawer where I kept my notebooks and pulled out a fresh one. On the first page, I wrote, "What's still mine?" Then I listed the building, the apartment, the deed, the keys, my name on the property tax, my own name. And in that moment, I didn't feel small. I felt awake. The next morning, I called June. June was Leonard's cousin on his mother's side. We'd stayed in touch over the years, mostly through Christmas cards and the occasional phone call. She used to work as a paralegal for a small law office out in Salem. She's retired now, but still sharp as ever. I figured if anyone could help me sort out what I actually owned and what I didn't, it'd be her. When I explained what I'd found, the deed, the building still in my name, she didn't sound surprised. "Men like Clifford assume things," she said. "Doesn't mean they're right." She offered to come by that afternoon, brought her reading glasses and a file folder of blank forms. We sat at my dining table while she looked through every document I had. The city registry still listed me as the property owner. The utilities, power, water, and garbage were all still under my name. Even the mailbox rental for the building's front address had my information on file. "No lease?" she asked. "No lease," I said. "Not once." She sat back and smiled a little. "Then you've got options." For 10 years, Clifford ran his business downstairs like he owned the place. He never paid rent, never offered. I never asked. I told myself it was a mother's way of helping a son get started. And back then, I believed that was the right thing to do. But now I wasn't so sure. June helped me separate the business and residential sides of the building legally. She recommended I form a small LLC under my name just to keep everything clean. "You're not evicting your son," she said. "You're protecting yourself." We filed the paperwork that week. I used part of my savings to pay the filing fee and set up a separate checking account for anything tied to the property. Once the LLC was official, I went out and had a new deadbolt installed on the stairwell that connected the downstairs shop to my upstairs apartment. No more walking up unannounced. No more casual visits from Caden or Clifford when they needed something. That same week, I wrote a formal lease termination notice for Clifford's business. June helped me keep it clear and respectful. I wasn't out to hurt him. I just wanted boundaries. The letter was simple. It gave him 45 days to find a new space. I left it on his desk in an envelope with his name written in my handwriting, the same way I used to label his lunch bags in grade school. While all that was happening, I started looking at rental listings online. I wasn't planning on moving out, but I wanted to see what the apartment might bring in if I ever decided to go. I took photos of the living room, cleaned the windows, ironed the curtains. I listed it on a local rental site just to test the waters. Within 24 hours, I had 5 inquiries. That surprised me. I hadn't realized how much people wanted places like this, quiet, walkable, near the river. One woman said she was moving to town to help care for her sister and needed a space just like mine. Another was a recently retired teacher looking for a peaceful place to write her memoir. I didn't accept any offers right away, but seeing them coming gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time, possibility. I could make a change if I wanted. I didn't have to stay stuck, and I didn't have to explain any of it to Clifford. I didn't call him, didn't warn him. I didn't leave hints or guilt trip texts. I didn't raise my voice. My silence became my power. I kept watering my plants. I kept going to the library. I cooked meals for myself, not to be shared or judged. I didn't answer when he buzzed from downstairs that week. Let the door ring and ring. He'd find the envelope soon enough. I wasn't doing this to punish him. I was doing this to stop shrinking. For years, I had made myself smaller so others could have more room. Now I was drawing new lines, not out of anger, not out of pride, but because it was time. And once I took that first step, I wasn't looking back. I waited until Tuesday morning to drop off the letter. I knew Clifford usually came in late on Tuesdays, so I walked downstairs just after 9 and let myself into the office. The lights were off. I stood for a moment, looking around. The same room that used to hold bolts of fabric, sewing machines, and my old register was now filled with rolling chairs, house listings on the wall, and stacks of business cards with Clifford's name. My name wasn't anywhere in sight. I placed the envelope on his desk and left without touching anything else. That afternoon, he buzzed the apartment twice. I didn't answer. Around 4 o'clock, he knocked on my door. I opened it halfway. He held the envelope in his hand. "Mom, what is this?" I didn't raise my voice. "It's a line, Clifford." He stared at me like I'd spoken a language he didn't know. "A line?" he repeated. "Yes, a boundary." He stepped back. "So you're kicking me out?" I shook my head. "I'm reclaiming my space." His voice rose. "You're overreacting. All this because of one comment at brunch. I didn't blink. No, Clifford, this isn't about brunch. That comment just showed me what's been true for years. He crossed his arms. You're punishing me. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. No, I'm stopping the part of me that thought being quiet meant being respected. He stayed in the doorway. We've built everything down there. Clients come in daily. There are files, printers. We can't just leave. I looked him in the eye. You have 30 days. He opened his mouth like he was going to argue, then closed it. Why now? I listed it plainly. I gave you free space for a decade, paid for things without being asked, took care of Caden when you couldn't, gave and gave, thinking it meant I mattered. But I don't. Not to you, not in the way that counts. You do matter, he said quietly. Then why was I the last to know everything? The last invited, if at all? Why do I find out about school changes and birthdays from Facebook pictures? He didn't have an answer. Love doesn't mean I disappear, Clifford, I said. I did what I did because I'm your mother, but being a mother doesn't mean I don't get to draw the line. He left without saying goodbye. Have you ever had to quietly draw a boundary with someone you love? Comment, I took the keys back. If you've ever found the courage to take your power back without raising your voice. Later that night, I logged into the school payment portal. I had been covering half of Caden's tuition without anyone asking me to, just quiet deposits each quarter because I believed in giving my grandson what he needed. I canceled the auto pay and sent an email to the school office explaining I would no longer be contributing. They could contact Clifford directly from now on. That same evening, Whitney showed up at my door. I could see the effort in her smile. Gladys, she said, can we talk? I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. She folded her arms, rubbing one sleeve. Clifford's under a lot of pressure. The business is just starting to grow again after a rough year. This change, it's a lot. Maybe we can work something out. I said nothing. I think what happened at brunch got blown out of proportion. He didn't mean it that way. He said what he meant. I said, and so did I. This space is mine. I'm allowed to use it how I choose. She bit her lip. It's going to put a strain on things. It already did, I replied. This just makes it visible. She didn't argue, just nodded and walked back down the stairs. I closed the door behind her and turned the bolt. That night, I walked through the downstairs space after they'd gone. It was quiet. I flipped on the overhead light and stood in the center of the room. The floor still had scuff marks from the big cutting table Leonard made me. I ran my fingers along the edge of the wall where he once mounted display shelves. I remembered him sanding those boards out back, proud of how smooth he got them. We'd built that store together. I didn't feel regret. I felt clear. I had let my life become a favor that others felt entitled to. Now, I was reclaiming what was mine, square foot by square foot. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just took the keys back. It's funny how space opens up once you stop giving all of yours away. After Clifford moved out of the downstairs unit, I sat on the empty floor for a long while. I didn't rush to fill it. I just listened to the quiet and let it settle. Then one morning, I saw a flyer posted at the library. A woman named Carla was looking for a spot to teach quilting. She didn't need much, just a clean room and access to outlets. I called her that same day. She came by, saw the space, and said, "This is perfect." A week later, Carla signed a short-term lease. 2 mornings a week, women from all over town came to that old shop with fabric totes and laughter. They brought energy back into the walls. Sometimes, when they left the door open, I'd hear music and stories floating upstairs. On Saturdays, a small yarn pop-up joined in. A couple from the next town over set up baskets of hand-dyed wool and little knitted samples. It gave the place life again, something I hadn't felt there in years. I never imagined turning the space into a business again, but it started to feel right. As for the apartment, I cleaned out the second bedroom and started listing it as a summer rental. Nothing fancy, just a quiet, furnished place for people passing through Eugene. I posted photos online and got messages from folks driving up the coast or visiting their kids at the university. I didn't make a fortune, but it was enough to feel useful. With the little extra income, I bought a used Subaru. Nothing shiny, but it ran well and had heated seats, which felt like a luxury after years of relying on the bus. I started taking weekend drives out to the coast, sometimes alone, sometimes with June or a neighbor. We'd walk the shore, eat clam chowder, and not talk too much. I also joined a stitching circle at the local church. Just a small group, 6 or 7 women my age. We sat in the rec room every Thursday afternoon, sewing and sharing. It felt good to be around women who didn't need anything from me, just my company. I began sleeping better. One afternoon in early spring, I was watering the porch plants when I saw Caden riding up the street on his bike. He hadn't been by since the move. I wasn't sure if he knew everything that had happened, but he looked unsure as he got closer. He stopped at the base of the stairs and looked up. "Hi, Grandma." "Hey, sweetheart," I said. He leaned on the handlebars. "Why don't you come over anymore?" I took a breath. "I'm still here," I said gently, but I needed to step back to see where I end and where others begin. He didn't say anything for a moment, then nodded like he understood something, even if he couldn't explain it. He came up the steps and hugged me. It wasn't long. It was a little stiff, but it was real. We sat for a while on the bench outside. He told me about school, soccer, and how Whitney let him make pancakes now, even if they came out lumpy. When he left, I felt something soften in my chest. The door wasn't closed between us. Maybe it never had been. Maybe it just needed to open from the middle, not one side. A week later, Clifford showed up. I heard the knock and opened the door to find him standing there, hands in his pockets. He looked tired. He didn't say sorry. He didn't bring anything, just stood there in the hallway. I saw Caden came by. He said, he did. He glanced around like he was trying to find the right words. Finally, he said, "If you ever want to come back, you can." I looked at him carefully. "I never left, Clifford. You just stopped seeing me." He nodded once, then turned and walked down the stairs. I closed the door quietly behind him. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I just felt steady. For the first time in a long while, my life wasn't wrapped around someone else's. It didn't mean I stopped loving my family. It just meant I started loving myself, too. 1 year later, my life looks nothing like it used to, and yet somehow it feels more like mine than it ever did before. On Tuesday mornings, I teach sewing for seniors at the rec center. It's not a big class. Sometimes it's 4 women, sometimes 10. We don't just sew, we talk. About grown kids who don't call, hips that ache in the winter, the recipes we still remember by heart. There's something comforting about threading a needle beside someone who knows exactly what it's like to be needed for decades, and then suddenly not. My Airbnb stays booked most months now. I get travelers from all over, retired couples on road trips, college parents in town for orientation, even a woman from Vermont who came to write her first book. I keep a small shelf of guest notes in the hallway, handwritten messages thanking me for the cozy space, the fresh coffee, the quiet. One woman left a note that said, "This place made me feel seen." That one got me. Clifford never gave me a full apology. I stopped expecting one. People don't always come back with the words we want. Sometimes they come back with silence. And that has to be enough. But a few months ago, I did get a message from Whitney. Short, no emojis. Just, "I think we misunderstood. who you were. I stared at that sentence for a while. I didn't reply, but I did show up when Caden invited me to his school performance. He was playing guitar with the jazz ensemble. I hadn't been to his school in a long time. The auditorium smelled like old chairs and popcorn. I found a seat near the back, behind some chatty parents. When Caden stepped on stage, he saw me. He smiled. That was enough for me. At the end of the performance, the lights came up. I gathered my coat and stood to leave. Across the gym, I saw Clifford. He raised a hand, half wave, half unsure. I nodded. Nothing more. That was enough, too. I don't need to be in the center of their lives anymore. I don't need to bake cakes to be invited. I don't need to hold a key to every door. I've built a new rhythm. I spend quiet mornings in my studio. The space downstairs that used to belong to Clifford's business now smells like lavender and cotton. I folded fabric onto open shelves and labeled baskets with ribbon, thread, and chalk. There's a bulletin board with stitching patterns and old photos from the shop's early days. Leonard sanding shelves. A teenage Clifford holding a cup of cocoa with powdered sugar on his nose. I still run my hand along the fabric bolts sometimes. It's a habit I'll never lose. That soft slide of cloth beneath my fingers feels like coming home. And that's what I've done. Come home to myself. I may not matter to them in the way I once did, but that's okay. I matter to me, and that has to be enough. Because being a mother doesn't mean fading into the background. Being kind doesn't mean staying silent. And being older doesn't mean you stop counting. I count. I exist beyond casseroles and emergency pickups and polite brunch invitations. I'm not extra. I'm enough. And if you've been watching this whole time, if any part of this story felt like yours, then maybe you needed to hear that too. Maybe you've been the one giving quietly for years, thinking your presence was the thank you. Maybe you've been shrinking yourself to fit the shape others made for you. Maybe you've been waiting for someone to say, you still matter. So here it is. You still matter. You always did. And if you've ever had to quietly reclaim your space, your voice, your worth, without yelling, without begging, then tell me your story in the comments. If this story spoke to something in you, please like the video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, real ones, honest ones, hit that subscribe button. We're not invisible, not by a long shot. And I'll keep telling these stories until every woman who's ever been made to feel like just extra remembers she is more than enough.